Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. Hello and welcome to SciTech Culture. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve? Ready to talk social media campaigns again, because they seems to come out with a new one every few weeks or so.
Yeah, but this is an interesting one and maybe a very positive one too. I don't know. But, at least it seems to have a very genuine motive.
So we're going to obviously discuss the hashtag Boycott NRA social media campaign that's really taken off in the States. I would think rightly so, given recent events with the school shooting in Florida, etc. But I want to also talk about it in context with what we were talking about last week, which was just to backtrack. You can also refer to that episode as well from last week, where we talked about how social media was used by Russians to basically attempt to influence the US election, but using it in a way that was actually as intended. Then you've got other broader social media campaigns. So the Me Too movement is another one, which I think is a little different to the Boycott NRA one, actually, where you've got only in the sense of what the actions being taken, what's been identified as an action to pursue. It may be a little bit potentially harder to define than what this Boycott NRA one is, which is basically the Boycott NRA one is about, essentially choking the NRA so that they can't get away with, how would you put it, influencing politicians so they don't pass any meaningful gun control legislation. And the part of what's making it work, and which is different to maybe what's happened in recent attempts, is that you've got young kids that have filmed this thing actually occur in real time. They've posted it to social media, and it's ended up in major news networks and gone around. You've got a hashtag that's rapidly gaining momentum, and now this has led to commercial backlash against the NRA itself, with a number of major organisations and corporations pulling their support or association with the NRA. So it's kind of like, broadly speaking, if you look at all of that in context, and there's more to add to that, I'm sure, but that there's like a yin and a yang to social media and its attempt to have a meaningful influence on things, that you can have really bad things come from it, but then you could have really good things come from it as well.
Yeah, well, I guess the first thing to start with here is that there probably isn't any fake news driving this, but there is no verification of, I guess, I don't know, what the movement aims or is driven by. It's driven by public opinion. And this is a very positive, very strong statement by Americans who want to see some form of gun control. So you wonder, the fact, as you've outlined, is they're using social media in exactly the same way that people that have used the fake news on social media to great effect have used it. They're activating, they're creating activism, they're motivating people to express their opinion and have an effect at the end, some sort of outcome. This is potentially quite positive in this light. So if you put restrictions on, certain groups that might be using it for nefarious purposes, the question is that then when we have a genuine and very serious issue that we need to address socially, maybe we would be in danger then of curtailing that free speech.
It's really tricky, isn't it, trying to get that balance right, which I'm sure is something that's going to preoccupy lawmakers, the public, anyone that engages and uses these things, and even the companies themselves that have created these platforms. How do you handle this issue? How do you find that balance?
Well, that's right, and it goes back to all of the arguments for and against free speech for years. Is it better to let a racist speak and then recognise the racist and know what you're dealing with, or do you just outlaw it and push it under the carpet? Neither is the right solution, and it's very difficult on topics like this to get the middle ground. So it's very interesting to see what will happen with the NRA, particularly. I think, at least social media here has given the Americans who want some sort of change to the gun laws some sort of real voice that can't be ignored. Will it put enough pressure on? I don't know.
Well, the interesting thing, I think, that I don't know if it happened before or whether it just happened to catch people's attention, is the kids responding this time. It's the students responding. So they're the ones speaking up. And what I think is interesting in light of this social media environment that we're in is that all of these kids that are coming through now have grown up with social media, have had it ingrained in their sort of cultural experience, for lack of a better term. And it's almost, someone made a comment about watching each of these kids get up on TV and sort of, say what they needed to say, etc. That not to say that it was a performance, but they were better equipped at getting in front of a camera or getting in front of a group of people and really clearly articulating what their issue with this particular problem was, and it cut through so well. And I guess part of these platforms, wouldn't say it's responsible for it, but it provided an environment where they were more trained to do it. Whereas, I don't know, maybe if when we were 15, I don't know if we could get in front of a camera and do the same sort of thing.
Well, yes, and I certainly don't want to view this cynically, but maybe, I would say by now there have been a lot of shootings at schools in America over the last 12 months. I couldn't believe I can't even remember what the figures were for how many students had already died at school with firearms this year. So this is a very serious issue, and obviously the people that want to change the laws and avoid this happening have a very strong case, and they're actually quite mature now. And as I say, I don't want to be cynical about this, but I think that those students who appeared and are driving the social media campaign, this is a proper social media campaign. And this is what gets back to the whole Russian interference. That was a proper social media campaign. That was, people using the tool and knowing how to get the best effect out of the tool. So that's what sways opinions, and somebody probably, in terms of the gun campaign, knows exactly how to use social media for the greatest effect, and it's working, and good on them. But yeah, it's a fine line. It's a fine line.
Well, just to look at a couple of different examples of this is for instance, and this is where the corporate angle is kind of perplexing, because it's kind of like, well, okay, so it's only when such a light was shone on this issue that they suddenly start to sever ties with the NRA and the things that they've got with them. Car rental companies, airlines, hotel chains. Obviously it's discounts for NRA members, and now they're obviously that's not going to go forward. But
when you see the amount of backing that there is, you realise how much there is actually at stake. This seems to me a little bit more than just guns.
And now part of the movement is targeting the tech giants now to actually boycott the NRA as well, in whatever association that they may have with them.
Well, it's censorship, effectively. Yeah. They're going for censorship so the NRA can no longer express their point of view. Now, we may or may not agree with the NRA's point of view, but I think that too potentially is dangerous. This might be a good cause, but what happens if it's a questionable cause?
The other flip side to that, of course, too, is that there's been some questionable communications and rhetoric coming from the NRA, and one can argue whether or not they're behind it or not. But some of the really crazy conspiracy theories that came out after the school shooting, that the kids were all crisis actors, that they just went around from place to place, putting on the show so that it would feed into the liberal agenda or the ultra left agenda. That the fact that there's actually people out there that are even suggesting it is just crazy. And
this is the country where 30% of the people think the moon landings were faked.
Yeah. And then if you tie that back to social media, that's where such a big problem lies, because the platforms still allow for the ability to entertain this type of stuff and play to those audiences. And there's so again, it comes back to that question I think we were talking about last week, is what do you do with these companies that put these platforms out there? It seems like if you chop them off at the knees somewhere to prevent this bad thing from happening over here, it's going to stop the good thing that's happening over there, or good things that are happening over there. And it's really hard. It almost requires a guide, a written guide by someone, but that the public can sort of access in terms of how, sort of suggested practices for social media. But who's the persons or people that are going to write such a guide? Is it going to actually be accurate and do the job as intended, or are we just going to be stumbling through this for the next 20 years until we work it out?
I don't know what will happen. I've got a science fiction idea of what might happen, but I mean, at the end of the day, I think everyone will sign on to their social media account with their real identity. The anonymity will have to stop. And the other thing on this as well is that while this activism might be very positive on this side, it's also very polarising. So all it's going to do now is galvanise NRA people into believing that they're under attack. And the really sad and scary thing about that is when those guys think they're under attack, we all know how they think they need to solve the solution. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, Steve, we might wrap it up there, and we'll keep checking in with this, because I think the social media campaigns, I should say, of the last 12 months or so have a different quality to them than perhaps some that have happened in the past, and in different scenarios. And it's interesting to see how it gets used, whether it's for good or for bad.
Well, yeah, it's something that we'll be seeing for, I think, many years
to come
on now. There'll be this whole battle of what social media is. And, some people might be arguing about the Constitution and right to bear arms now, but could also come down on social media to the Constitution and the right to express free speech. Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah, interesting times. All right, so don't forget our website, SciTechCulture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. Subscribe to all our channels, Vimeo, YouTube, etc. And we've got our podcast audio, etc. So I hope you enjoy all the content we have on that website. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.